How's it going, everybody? It's Riley's Redzone here, back with another Redzone's roster previews episode. And in today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, in this series, I go through the teams and I rank them from last to first based on basically my power rankings. And I look at every single player on the team and I project whether they will be, roster player, perhaps a star on the team, if they'll make the practice squad, or if they'll just be cut altogether. So, this is not the first episode in the series, so you can see all the previous ones up in the corner there. So, with that being said, I'm just going to get right into it talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, before we even talk about the players, I'm going to do what I do in previous episodes. Let's talk about the coaching, the culture. And I'm excited for this episode. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of new, just overall changes for this team. There's a lot of new faces, some returning faces. There's just all types of different players on this team. And it also starts here with Urban Meyer, who they decide to bring back, from the college game. He retires basically because of health issues from Ohio State a few years ago. Starts becoming a TV analyst. We've seen that, he talked about with John Gruden, for example. And then they decide to bring him in here, giving him the number 1 overall pick. He can do whatever he wants with. He starts recruiting some guys that he has some connection with. And so this is a great opportunity, I guess, not only to talk about Urban Meyer himself, but a little bit about what happens, for example, when you do this and bring in a college coach in to be a head coach. It has not worked out for some coaches in the past. I would say more times than not, it long-term doesn't work out, but then we do see it sometimes. For example, I would say Pete Carroll for the Seattle Seahawks has turned out pretty well, winning Super Bowl, but you also see guys like a Chip Kelly who it just does not work. It is a completely different atmosphere. Now, the thing I like about, though, with Urban Meyer's situation is if there were a team that could be good for a college coach to come in and maybe make some good plays, I think it's actually the Jacksonville Jaguars. Getting a new young quarterback that he probably at least has some relation with, bringing in some guys he knows well, having just a lot of young players who might have actually played against him as a coach. I think that is a good situation for him. I don't think he is ever going to be a great NFL coach, especially since he's this far into a career. But he does bring just a stability level to me. So I do think it's an interesting approach, and I don't think he's going to be that bad. I don't think he's going to win a Super Bowl with the Jacksonville Jaguars, personally, at least not right away, like a Pete Carroll did kind of with the Seahawks, but I also think he's going to be more successful than some other coaches. I do think that Meyer can stick around here for multiple, at least a few seasons with Trevor Lawrence, with some other players we'll talk about, and maybe, have some fun, basically, is what I see this as. So, very interesting situation to bring in Urban Meyer back from the college ranks. We'll see how it works out for them. Next, let's talk about the actual players, starting with Trevor Lawrence. Getting the number 1 pick. He was the clear number 1 choice this year. I talked about it kind of in my draft videos, if you want to go back and look at those as well. He was the consensus. Now, he is not a picture-perfect prospect, but he's pretty close. He just makes great throws. He is a winner. He's relatively mobile. He has great size, too, for a guy that's 6'6". He actually can move pretty well. I will say, sometimes he can make some risky plays, but not very often, especially compared to some other quarterbacks in this draft class and in the league. I think he will be a stability here, and you can feel confident in him for the next few years, especially if you're looking at a kind of a lower upside coach like Urban Meyer, even if you, let's say, threw out the possibility of picking Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. Lawrence is the safest, and he is the best at the moment. I could see, honestly, in the future, those three being close, and, I think all three are going to be unbelievable. But the sure thing here is Trevor Lawrence. So I think they made a decent choice there, and he's going to be good. in this offense, especially if he can get some connections with some other players, which we know he has based on, them picking a teammate of his we'll talk about in a bit. But I also just want to talk about Gardner Minshew for a second. He's kind of been thrown under the bus. I mean, quite a story for this guy. Comes in as a 6th-round pick, which before that, people don't remember this. I remember, every year going through magazines and going through depth charts of college football and seeing Gardner Minshew on East Carolina for a few years. And then he decides he was maybe going to transfer to Alabama to basically be a coach. Then he goes to Washington State with Mike Leach, running the air raid offense, and he actually succeeds a little bit, and he gets picked in the 6th round. And then Nick Foles goes down a few seasons ago, and he steps in and plays relatively well. He did not do statistically that bad last year. I think he still is a fringe, borderline starter potentially. So that's why I was honestly shocked. He's going to be a great backup here. But for example, we saw a few years ago when Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt for the Vikings, they give up a 1st-round pick for Sam Bradford, who's not even in the league anymore. They let him go after like 2 seasons. I feel like Gardner Minshew, I thought he was maybe could be traded this offseason, but all the other dominoes kind of fell. But I think that if some injury for any reason were to happen to a starting quarterback in the league, I feel like one of the first places you should call is Jacksonville, because they have Trevor Lawrence, who is clearly their future, and you feel confident in that. But if you need a replacement, I feel like Gardner Minshew could be a good choice. But if not, he's going to be a great backup for this team. I mean, you have some security. There's been reports of, I think it was a quarterback coach or a coordinator saying it's an open competition for the quarterback spot. It's not. It's Trevor Lawrence to me. At least if I'm, running that team, it's clear. But Gardner Minshew is not bad at all. So he can be a starter for some team, if needed. So behind him, this is also an interesting room. I loved them bringing in C.J. Beathard from the 49ers. A guy who played in the Big Ten, maybe knows Urban Meyer well. I like him a lot. I just personally couldn't find space on this team to keep him. I do think he is an NFL backup level player. I feel like he's in the top 64 quarterbacks, of deserving a backup spot. I just couldn't find space in this room. But I think that Beathard, I personally liked him more than Nick Mullins for the Niners last year, who stepped in a bit when Garoppolo was hurt. So he's a pocket passer, but I truly think he has a little bit of a gunslinger type to him still. So I just can't find space for him, but I truly think he could, be a backup somewhere. If they didn't have Minshew here, that's why I think they could also feel comfortable trading Minshew, is because they have a guy like C.J. Beathard behind him. And then behind that as well, they have Jake Luton, who stepped in last year for a game or two when needed to start, and he did okay as another 6th round, 7th round pick out of Oregon State. Had a decent arm in that game or two that he played. He made some good deep throws, but I just don't think he's on the roster at this point. But you do want to keep him on the practice squad. I think he can still develop into a solid backup. So this quarterback room is deep. I feel extremely confident in it. I think it's a great room. There's so much talent that, there's even backup players that I'm choosing to cut that are NFL roster caliber. So overall, I truly think this is a great room, and you feel extremely confident in it. And within a few years, once again, Trevor Lawrence, will be a top quarterback in the league. Now jumping to another very interesting position, the running back position on this team is another very interesting position. If I talk a little bit about fantasy football in the series, if this is a bad backfield to touch, you do not necessarily feel confident drafting somebody. Because I was shocked when this team, I thought they would pick another running back in the draft, potentially. But when they choose to pick Travis Etienne in the 1st round, after James Robinson has one of the greatest undrafted rookie seasons of all time, they decide to bring in a 1st rounder. I just didn't understand it right away, because I like James Robinson a lot. I think he's explosive. He had an extremely good season last year as an undrafted rookie. This team decides to cut Leonard Fournette, and it's who is going to step up for this team. And James Robinson said, sure, I'm going to take this opportunity as an undrafted rookie. No preseason. Step in there. And was like a borderline Pro Bowl level running back last season. So I thought, okay, they might draft a guy, maybe even in the second round, but more so like third, fourth, fifth round. They brought in Carlos Hyde. Okay, they feel pretty good about this. I like James Robinson. But then they bring in Travis Etienne, who, yes, it connects with Clemson, with Trevor Lawrence, but I was confused on the pick, not also because of talent, but specifically, I thought the only running back that should have gone in the first round, sure thing, absolutely, was Najee Harris, and he did. For me, Etienne, Javonte Williams, those were borderline guys that I wouldn't have, been too upset for teams that were contenders. Maybe were like the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, and I called it on. If you go watch like my live stream of their first game, I didn't think he was going to be a great option for them year one for fantasy, for example. He ended up not working out, but I understood the pick because he is a good running back now, and I think he will be in the future, but he didn't make an impact year one. But I understood the pick because Kansas City just wins the Super Bowl, and what they were really missing was, let's just get another, because we have the luxury to do that, let's just go get another player that can add to our team. Like Pittsburgh this year. They lose James Conner, they bring in Najee Harris to succeed there because they were like one step away. They have a great defense. I don't think this team was in position to take Travis Etienne that early, especially since you look at this top three. Robinson's an all-around great player. Hyde, to me, can be a power back and be goal line, short yardage situations. He might steal some carries. There's been reports that Etienne might just be a third down guy at this point. And so you're telling me you spent a first round pick on a third down running back? Especially when you're not a contender? I don't understand that. I do like Etienne. I do think he offers great receiving ability. Once again, like James Robinson, pretty explosive, good in open space. I just didn't understand the pick that early. They had, the first pick of the second round. They could have took him there, in my opinion. I think it would have been better if they just took like a different corner or Tyson Campbell, like they did in the first. But I didn't understand that. But he's a good player. I just don't see how this running back fits. You're gonna, I would rather give a guy confidence, and I think James Robinson. We've seen him obviously break through when he has competition, but after what he did last year, I would feel pretty confident with him. As I mentioned, they bring back Carlos Hyde. He was on the Jacksonville Jaguars a few years ago. Then, he moves on, actually had some productive seasons in Houston and Seattle, and then he comes back here for the Jaguars, and it's also the Urban Meyer Ohio State connection. So I do think that he could, unfortunately, I guess for the other two, steal some carries. He's not going to be a great player, though, but he's a depth piece. And then I have them keeping Dare Ogunbowale, who's a special teams ace. Great player. He was really good for the Bucks at special teams. And so he comes in here. He did play for them last year a little bit and just offers, some special teams ability. Then behind him, they have Divine Ozigbo, and he has not done a whole lot for them, but I do think he still can develop. And I just am not a Nathan Cottrell guy. I think they actually ended up drafting him. I thought he would be undrafted. So I actually don't think he even makes this team, personally. I just don't think he offers that many skills. So looking at this room, it's just, what do you do? I mean, they have the talent. Once again, like the quarterback position, you have a lot of great players here. But where does everybody fit in? What's the role everybody has? Like, I would be giving James Robinson the ball 3 times. I think he's an all-down back. But I think Etienne's going to come in on third down. And Hyde's going to come in, on short yardage goal line situations. And then it's just, if you're in fantasy football, do not touch this backfield in the first, however many rounds. If you get a steal, if you can get somebody late, great, I guess. But otherwise, don't have a whole ton of confidence in somebody really playing well for this team. Then let's talk about this wide receiver room. Another very, very filled with depth room. DJ Chark, who I like a lot. I feel confident in. People, to me, this year are getting too much on the Laviska Shenault hype train. I do think he's going to take a huge step up. I think he's going to be great. I like Laviska Shenault. But don't get it twisted here. DJ Chark is still the number one on this team. They bring in Marvin Jones as a great number two. He's one of the best in the league. But DJ Chark, I feel really confident in. I think he's great. He's, maybe he didn't perform as well last year as he did the year before, but I truly think he still is a really good player and can perform super well for this team. So I feel confident in him as a number one. Loved them bringing in Marvin Jones. I gave it an A in the free agency video. It might have been an A+ because this was just such a good move. They needed a number two. I view Laviska Shenault as a gadget slot guy who you give the ball in open space. So they needed another receiver opposite DJ Chark, and they bring that in with Marvin Jones, and I absolutely love that. That is something I will give credit on. I didn't agree with all the free agency signings the Jaguars made, but that's a great example of Urban Meyer going out and recruiting guys. That takes a talent. Normally when we see this, it doesn't work because money's involved now, but I think it's worked out for Urban Meyer this offseason. Marvin Jones, one of the best signings, will be great as a number two here. Then you also have Laviska Shenault, as I mentioned. I view him as kind of that X factor. If he takes a big step up, he can greatly improve this offense. But I just don't think he's going to be right away a top target. But I do think he's going to step up, and you give him the ball in open space, he can make some big plays happen. They also have Colin Johnson out of Texas, and he is great at making some spectacular plays when given opportunities. So I think that he can be just an all-around explosive backup. I also have to talk about here one of, in my opinion, the worst free agency signings. I understand he's great at returning, at special teams, but they paid this dude like a real wide receiver almost, in my opinion. Jamal Agnew, converted corner. Now they list him at a wide receiver. He still wears number 39. I thought it was one of the worst free agency signings this offseason, and I will, live on that hill. I just don't think it's going to work out. He might be great as a returner, but you're going to give this dude a massive contract to be a returner. Didn't love that. Then for this 6 wide receiver spot, you're going to have a competition between like 4 guys. You've got 3 veterans, and then the X Factor rookie Jalen Camp out of Georgia Tech. But then it's down to me between Philip Dorsett, who has kind of bounced around a bit, not been all that successful, but he did succeed as a college player. He was like a first-round pick, so that's why Urban Meyer is trying to take advantage of some of these guys, untapping that potential. So I think he makes the roster just because of his speed, and I think he can still offer something. But you also have Laquan Treadwell, who has not performed great, obviously. He was a bust. Once again, another example of a first-round pick for the Vikings. He actually, he scored more touchdowns last year, I think, for the Falcons than he possibly did in his whole career as a Viking. So he can be a veteran depth receiver at this point. I don't feel great in him, though. Farrell Cooper I like a lot as a special teams player. So that's another great option. Those are your top guys. And as I mentioned, Jalen Camp is an X factor. I have him staying on the practice squad. Could use some more development time. But I truly think that he could be an X factor here within a year or two. So I'm going to specifically talk about Jalen Camp there. I just think that he is a jump ball guy, can make some explosive plays. He was on a Georgia Tech offense that, didn't have great quarterback play. They had to stick in a freshman, Jeff Sims, who could be a great quarterback one day. But he was, a freshman, no off season for him to develop there. They just stick him out there. So he didn't have much to work with, and he actually performed relatively well. Then they also have, some other players below those guys, but none of them I think are NFL talent. So I do like this receiver room a lot. I like the spot where everybody's at. I feel confident with Chark as a 1, Jones as a 2, and Shenault as a 3, borderline 2 gadget guy. That's what I really feel confident in. I don't love everything behind that. They just are throwing darts at the board, hoping, with a mix of skill sets, hoping some will connect somewhere. we'll see what happens behind him. But I do like the rotation here at wide receiver. Then let's talk about the tight ends. And this is an interesting group. We obviously have some players to talk about that I haven't been able to talk about, this offseason. You probably see that name. But this is not a great tight end room. Even the fact that, I'll root for Tim Tebow. I hope that he can maybe make a team. I think the only reason he has been given a chance is his connection with Urban Meyer. Now, I do like the fact that he could be a pillar for players in the future that have been out of the league for so long that maybe they have a chance to make it back in the league. But we can't expect him to be an NFL-level tight end right away. That's the truth. It's a good story, I guess, for him, to have a chance. I do think he will stick around based on his connection with Urban Meyer. I think it'll be hard, unless Urban straight up was like, hey, come try a tight end. You're probably going to get cut, but if you show something, we'll keep you. Unless that happened, I just don't see Urban being willing to let go of Tebow. But let's talk about the other guys, because I don't think he's quite roster level, but he could be next factor. This is just not a good tight end room. It's just not. They even traded somebody away that was fine. Josh Oliver was a bust for this team. But they pay Chris Manhertz, who is a blocker, who has been a second or third tight end his whole career. They pay him a decent contract to be a starter, realistically, here. I don't feel very confident in that overall. So I don't feel great about that. Then you have James O'Shaughnessy, who I like. Not as a starter, though. He's going to have to be in the rotation here. And then I didn't love Luke Farrell coming out of Ohio State this year, and I know that's why they picked him. I do think at this moment he has more than a Tyler Davis or a Tim Tebow at tight end. But I just don't like this room at all. This is one of the biggest weaknesses on this entire team. Even trying to bring in, some X factors. I just don't see it here. And as I mentioned, Tyler Davis, I think is still a practice squad player, but Tim Tebow, once again, I think they'll give him a try. I just don't see him right now as a NFL level, but I don't think they'll just give up on him right away, which is why I have him sticking on the practice squad. And I have him cutting Ben Ellefson. So in conclusion, this is kind of a quick position to talk about because there's just not that much here. I just don't like this position at all. Then let's talk about this offensive line. Interesting offensive line. Actually not that bad. Not the best you've ever seen, though, specifically in depth. Let's start with the left side here. You have Cam Robinson, from Alabama a few years ago. They give him a franchise tag. Not going to be able to get a deal done. I don't see him as a franchise left tackle. So I can understand them not paying him right away, especially when you draft his potential replacement, which I'll talk about in a bit. He's a decent tackle that I think will always be a starter. He's a startable, but I'm not looking to give him a huge extension, in my opinion. Like the last few tackles we've talked about on this series, I feel better in. Even those like middle of the pack guys like Jake Matthews, for example. Like give me any of the, a lot of the tackles we've covered in this series. Give me them instead of Cam Robinson. So he's a startable player. I just don't see him as an elite tackle, especially if you're going to be paying him that much. They have Andrew Norwell. It was a big free agency signing a few years ago, but a good one. He's performed relatively well to slide him in at guard, and then they kicked Linder into center. Great center as well. So I like that left side for sure. The right side, AJ Cann has just been kind of okay his whole career. Backup fringe starter level, in my opinion. And I don't feel super confident in him. I think he's a startable player, but I don't feel great in that. I do like Juwan Taylor. He's a startable player to me. I liked him coming out of Florida. But let's talk about Walker Little. An ultimate X factor. This is why I think you can feel okay letting go of Cam Robinson after this year, because I don't like, extending him to a big contract. I don't think he's that good of a player. Walker Little, they pick in the second round, and he is an interesting player. He his tape was decent. He had some rough games too, like the Notre Dame one. But he played decent, right? So you think, okay, this sounds like a good guy. He hasn't played, though. This tape that we saw was from 2018. Like 3 years ago. He hasn't played competitive football in like 3 years. And you may be wondering how that happened. Well, he was injured in 2019. And then he opted out of 2020. So yes, the tape you see is good. But I do think, he hasn't played in a while. So that's why it's great that you have Cam Robinson. This is why I love that pick for the Jags. You have Cam Robinson on a franchise tag. You choose not to pay him. And then you get Walker Little next year. If he plays anything like he did for most of the games in 2018, great. They also have Ben Barch as a nice backup guard. Small school guy. I think it was like St. John's. He is a good backup. They picked him like the 4th round, good value. So I actually like that. Then they have Tyler Shatley, who is just kind of a backup player. Same with Casey McDermott. They also have Will Richardson, another just kind of backup player. So those 3 are just kind of solid backups, I guess, but you don't feel comfortable with them starting. And they have a bunch of other players. I just have them cutting. I don't have them keeping anybody on the practice squad. So overall, this is a decent line. I like 3 or 4/5 of the starters and some of their bench. But I just don't feel super confident in all of them. But I do like this a lot, actually, as a pretty good offensive line. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. Let's start talking about their edge rushers. This is an interesting group. You're hoping for some development. Josh Allen, not the other Josh Allen, but he's shown some flashes. I thought it was a great pick when they chose him. He, has shown some ability to sack the quarterback. You're hoping for him to truly prove, that he can be a number 1 edge rusher. They let go now of, over the past few years, Calais Campbell and Unique Ngakoue. So you're really looking for that pass rush presence to be filled from Josh Allen. And you're also looking for K'Lavon Chaisson to step up. We knew he was kind of a raw prospect coming out of LSU last year. I love that pick for them. He fell right into their lap. But he did not do much as a rookie. We need him to improve. But if he doesn't, they bring in Roy Robertson Harris, who they paid a lot of money. I didn't think the contract was great. They paid him, I think they're paying him like $10 million a year or something like that, or close to it. Don't love that at all. He's not proven to be a consistent pass rusher. But I do think what he has shown is great in flashes. So if Chaisson is just not working out, you have Roy Robertson Harris. So I do like him as a player, him being on this team. I just didn't love the contract. Then Dawuane Smoot they bring back just as a depth piece. They pick Jordan Smith out of UAB, maybe looking to be a quick, explosive pass rusher. And then they have Adam Gotsis, who, I just want to give some credit. He played great last year as, an off-the-street free agent. I literally mentioned when I did free agency grades last year, for the first video, I said, for example, it was the Cardinals, I think, go get Adam Gotsis. And he played pretty well for this team last year. So he actually performed pretty well. So I think they keep him around. So I'm keeping a lot of players. Gotsis also more of a run stopper as well, kind of including him in this group. Behind him, I didn't understand the Jihad Ward contract. He's bounced around from team to team. They gave him a $3 million contract. I just don't see him fitting into this team. And then Laurenti McCray, I think, was an opt-out last year. If not, he just didn't do much. And then Aaron Patrick, I have him being cut as well. So this potential in this edge room, you can get Saxonville back as your motto if some of these guys can step up. I mean, you're looking at those 6. I feel confident within a year or two in Allen, Chaisson, Robertson, Harrison, Smith to just be a future, quick pass rusher, high upside players. But at the moment, we just need to see a little bit more. Then let's go to the defensive tackles, these kind of interior run stop guys. They trade for Malcolm Brown. Interesting move there from the Saints. He, will be a leader, because Taven Bryan, first round pick a few years ago, has not done anything for this team. He's been a pretty big bust. Maybe you're hoping Urban Meyer can bring something out of him, but if not, you have players, right behind him, with Devon Hamilton, who they took pretty high out of Ohio State last year. Another great connection to Urban Meyer. And then Jay Tufele, who they pick in the 4th round this year out of USC. They have a lot of depth here. I don't feel confident in I don't think Malcolm Brown is a number 1 defensive tackle level player, but I do think the depth is very good here. And Doug Costin, who I have on the practice squad, actually a roster level player kind of as well. Don't feel great in anybody behind that, but the depth here is good. I just need to see somebody in this room prove to be the alpha dog, really step up. My leading candidate from this group might actually be Devon Hamilton. So that room is filled with depth, at least, even if it's not top heavy. Then let's talk about the linebackers. Miles Jack, leader of this defense, has been here for a while. A great player overall, performed really well. He can do everything. He can run from sideline to sideline. Still an underrated thing about that. People forget about this Jacksonville team. Telvin Smith was a good player, and he just kind of walked away. If they still had Telvin Smith and Miles Jack, this defense would be absolutely loaded. But, the Miles Jack is really, really good. They brought in Joe Schobert last year. I didn't think it was a great signing, but he actually performed pretty well. Leading tackler, kind of. People overrate that. It's not, tackles are not important, but, if you're talking about statistics, he can bring that too. But Leon Jacobs is kind of an underrated player, I feel like, as well. He's pretty quick and runs sideline to sideline as well. Not particularly great at tackling, but offers some speed. So I like Miles Jack all around that rotation. Otherwise, you have Quincy Williams, who they took pretty high. He is a high upside player, so could compete with Jacobs for that role. Then they bring in Damian Wilson, bring in some of that winning culture, a Big Ten player, connection with Urban Meyer, I guess. He played at Minnesota. He, has been on a winning team with the Chiefs over the past few years. So to bring some leadership in this relatively young linebacker room is a good idea. And then you're going to have a competition for that last linebacker spot between all of the remaining players. I have them all being on the practice squad or better. I like Shaquille Quarterman. Otherwise, Dakota Allen, Dylan Moses, or Chappelle Russell, all are good options. By the way, I was shocked Dylan Moses ended up going undrafted this year from Bama. So you have, a young player that will make the team as a 6th linebacker, which is the theme of this whole room, is speed. You have guys who can make tackles, who can run sideline to sideline, and that is what, the new NFL is. So they have a diverse group here. I like that a lot. And so I feel actually pretty confident in this team overall at the linebacker position. So then let's talk about the corners. I don't know about, this corner room. It's good, but it's interesting. Shaquille Griffin, I think, did start to blossom and prove he was kind of a borderline 1, but they go out and pay this dude like he's a top 10 corner. This dude gets a massive contract. And I thought they felt confident in C.J. Henderson. I do like it now that they have 2 startable players, instead of just C.J. Henderson. But I think C.J. Henderson did not have a great rookie year. None of the corners really did last year. Okuda didn't work out either. He, is, a strong, lengthy corner, but he did not do much as a rookie. Shaquille Griffin, his speed. So you're hoping that one of those 2 proves to be a number 1. I think Shaquille will be, but a huge contract for Shaquille there. And then, as I mentioned, they have C.J. Henderson. They took Tyson Campbell, top of the 2nd round. Decent choice just to be involved there. You have Trey Herndon as well. And then another competition there will be between Sidney Jones, maybe Chris Claybrooks. They just have a bunch of players that could compete for that last spot. So after the top 2, I kind of grouped those guys together. But Tyson Campbell, I think, will step out to be that number 3 corner. Trey Herndon shows some speed. I think can be a good special teams player. Sidney Jones, just a decent amount of coverage. Then, as I mentioned, Chris Claybrooks, Luke Barku, Brandon Rusnak. And then can we quick point out, I have Jameson Houston being cut. But maybe they saw something in each other, but one of the most random trades this offseason was literally the Jags took Josiah Scott, a corner out of Michigan State, in the 6th round last year. Jameson Houston was an undrafted rookie, I think, last year. But they just straight up called the Eagles up, or the Eagles called the Jaguars up, and was just like, hey, can we swap these two corners? Both are like borderline roster guys. Just swap them. Yeah, that's just random. But this is not a great room, to be honest. I like their two starters, and I like Tyson Campbell being in the rotation. I feel confident in that, but behind that, never really been a Trey Herndon fan. I think Sidney Jones still needs some time. He just hasn't really developed out of Washington. I just don't love this corner room overall. So then let's jump to the safety room, though. Interesting. A little better than the corner room, in my opinion. Filled with depth, but not particularly great. I mean, they bring in Rayshon Jenkins, another player who I thought they just overpaid badly. He was decent for the Chargers, but he was never a great player for them, and they give him the bag as one of the first free agency signings. Didn't understand that at all. They bring in Andre Cisco, relatively high in the draft. I like that because they need somebody else at safety. Because Andrew Wingard, to me, is just not a great player. I do like Daniel Thomas, though. Surprised he, fell in the draft, and he actually performed pretty well out of Auburn. I think he has the highest potential out of him and Wingard. So I feel like I just don't know. Once again, I don't know how they made it through with their starting safeties last year. Another player I thought they gave a pointless contract to is Rudy Ford. Another guy like Jihad Ward, they just said, okay, here's $3 million 1 year. I'd rather them keep a high upside guy like Daniel Thomas. You also could see Jared Wilson make the team. He's been around for a while. I just think he's kind of been pushed out by younger players. Then Josh Jones, didn't really work out for the Packers. And I think he went to Dallas for a bit. Hard hitter, just not done much. I just don't love this safety room right now. I actually think the future starting tandem would have been better with Cisco and Thomas, but they paid Rayshon Jenkins with I think a 3 or 4 year contract. I do think that Urban Meyer did a good job getting guys to Jacksonville, but maybe not in the right way. I think they gave him a lot of money when they didn't necessarily need to always. So lastly, let's talk about special teams. You are going to have a kicker competition. I like Josh Lambo, but they also have Aldrich Rosas. So you'll have a competition between those two. Take your pick. I like Lambo more. Logan Cook is a decent punter. And then they have Ross Matisic, who, is just another long snapper. So decent there. So this is the point in the video where I start to talk about the schedule. And let's take a look at this schedule. I mark teams, and games with 50s. And if you're new to the series, you may be wondering what those are. This is my first year really trying this series, and so I just am kind of experimenting with. I've realized already a lot of changes happen, between videos, and pretty quickly. So I basically put 2 games that I think are close. Maybe it's because they're both away games, both home games, 2 teams ranked similarly in my rankings, and then I color code them with a different team. And basically, for each 2 games, you predict their ranked 50s. You predict them to win one, and the color goes with the other one. So they start, on the road, going to Houston. I think they can win that game. I truly think they can. The Broncos, I don't think they're getting Aaron Rodgers at this point, personally. But if they don't look great at quarterback. Winnable game. The Cardinals, I think, are going to be good. I think Kyler takes a step up this year. The Bengals, I revealed already. The Titans, brought in Julio. That's going to be tough this year. Dolphins are winnable if Tua doesn't make a step. Their bye week is kind of early. I don't love that. Seattle Seahawks on the road. Buffalo Bills. And then Colts on the road. And then the Niners. Tough stretch there. Falcons, I already revealed. The Rams. The Titans are 2 on the road tough games. And then Texans, Jets, like that's a good stretch right there. You could get a few straight wins. Then they have the Patriots, tough game, and the Colts. Carson Wentz could be good for that team. So I have them winning 4 games, and that's not great. So we're still on the 4 track. We'll see if we break out of it in the next one. I just don't think this team's going to be great right out the gate, and I think that's understandable. But I like this team's direction. I like the culture. I like the players. I do really think this is a decent team overall. So let's quick talk about the awards. Who am I giving some awards to on this team? I'm giving the same player, Offensive Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year. I think Trevor Lawrence steps in, plays really well, takes control of this offense, and performs at a high level overall. I see that happening. So then I have, Miles Jack, as I mentioned, really good defensive player. He's going to be the leader, one of the, kind of last standing players on this, when they were really, really good a few years ago, but even so right after. So I think he's a great linebacker overall. My breakout player of the year came down to 2. It's between K'Lavon Chaisson and Laviska Shenault. I decided to go with Chaisson just because I feel like Shenault already did okay as a rookie, and he's a number 3, more of a gadget player at the moment. I think Chaisson needs to take a step up for this team to be any good as a pass rusher, and I do think he does. We knew coming out of LSU he's a quick guy, kind of a raw, needs some time to develop player. And that's proven to be the case, but I think give him another year or 2, he can actually live up to that potential. So with that being said, sorry for the little bit delay from the last episode and this one. I will also say, this is once again my first year doing this series. We'll see. I'm trying to get, as far as possible. I'm thinking about it already. The graphics, honestly, are what takes the longest to make in these videos for on-screen. So if it gets towards the end, if we're still over a month from football season, but if it starts getting close, I might need to start cutting those out just for convenience of getting all the episodes out. I think that will be more important so I can finish all 32 teams. But thank you so much if you're still listening this far in the video, and I will see you in the next one.